Professor Tempelhoff, thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for receiving us here today. Like I was saying to you, for me, it feels very wild that I get to sit here with you. How are you checking in?
Well, it's fantastic being able to talk to you about water,
Yes.
and it's one of my major passions that I have in my research and my writing, and I appreciate it if people talk to me about water and your interest. And I know it's very focused, and it's a very urgent topic that we need to discuss in society as a whole.
Yes.
And if we do not take care, we are going to run out of resources.
Yes.
And water is one of those resources. If we do not take care of it, if we do not nurture our available supplies and not contaminating our rivers and our streams, we may make it into the 2050s with comfort. But at present, I think we are over consuming water resources. We do not respect water, which actually comes for free
Mm.
from rain. We rely on the water cycle to provide us with new water.
Yes.
But we also need to go about at respecting water.
Yes. And we can, I guess we can never do that until we understand it.
We need to understand it. It
Mm.
is a major issue.
Before we go into water and the Vaal Triangle, I would like for us to introduce you. Um, please take us through your journey, your career, and who are you?
Okay. uh, I'm just an ordinary South African, uh, uh, living with my wife and my sons. The sons are in the Western Cape at present, but we are very close to the banks of the Vaal River,
Okay.
where I have a very specific investment and intellectual investment in. And uh, I think I will not be making a mistake if I explain to you how it was that I got this interest in water. Um, my wife and I, we were journalists in Johannesburg, and then that was in the 1980s. And then I got the invitation to go to what is today the Limpopo province.
Okay.
Uh, it was the Northern Transvaal in the pre 1994 period. And there at the University of the North, I started teaching history. And by 1986, we moved to Venda. And that
Okay.
is where we became Africans. And I told my wife, if we keep on going north from Joburg, we might just finish up on the Nile River
Yes.
in Egypt. So that was a joke. But then the New South Africa emerged in 1989. And then we started moving back to the University of Limpopo, and we came down to the Vaal Triangle in
Still a
19.
journalist then.
No, yes, she started with her journalism again in Polokwane before we came to Vanderbijlpark, and she became an avid environmental journalist, which she still is up to the present. And uh, when we came here, we saw all the pollution, the heavy industry, and I said to my wife, I saw the river where nobody was on the banks of the river. I couldn't understand that because having lived in drought conditions in Venda and in Lebowa, I thought, it's, how can people be so disrespectful towards water? And so I said to my wife, okay, we cannot change the place where we are living, but we can make a contribution to making people aware of the environment and what it means to conserve the environment in the interest of future generations, because we are two small kids
Yes.
that we were raising in the Vaal Triangle. And that is when she started carrying on with her very, very constructive journalism on the environment. And I started working on the Vaal River Barrage, on water supplies, and how we engage with it. It's kept its fascination for me. So it's basically 30 years now that I've been working in this field.
Yeah.
And I just wish I could have started 30 years earlier. It might have made it a lot more interesting. But we are thankful and we are privileged living close to the Vaal River.
Yes. No, it's very interesting. I mean, I think you are the first person that I know who has got such a deep interest in water and who spent so long, researching and, talking about water.
Yeah.
Sure. So in the 90s, when do you go into academics?
I started, well, I graduated with a master's degree from the University of Pretoria in 1981.
Okay.
And then in 1984, we moved up to the north. And by that time, I had already started looking at the history of what is today Limpopo province. And when some of the first large white settlements started in the north, and I looked at land tenure.
Okay.
You must imagine European traditions of land tenure, land ownership, and indigenous ownership of the land, two different scales. And that is where I became aware of natural resources, the importance of natural resources that you use, forests and plowing lands and livestock, etc. So I started working in land conservation and the development of urbanization and the emergent conflicts between people of Africa, indigenous people of African, meeting up with people of Europe, of European descent in South Africa. And we looked at the frontier condition or the situation where cultures meet.
Okay.
And what interactions there were. And so natural resources became one way of my comprehension of history.
Okay.
For example, mining resources, water resources, forestry resources, you name it. Everything that you transform nature to serve your purposes, I think, is a cultural resource that you start developing. And very often it has negative consequences if you don't go about it in the right way. So that has been my focus, and it's driven me to realize the importance of water, because you and I, as we sit here, 85% of our functions, our bodies, are driven by water.
Yes.
And the heart is just actually a water tube. It's muscles.
Yes.
And it functions thanks to water. So if you suffer from a heart attack someday, you must know you didn't drink enough water. No, I'm joking, but it shows you how important water is. It's probably as close as can be to it, because your muscles and my muscles, it's all functions with the ability of water being available within the body.
Yes.
So it starts with the individual. And so that's how I started thinking about this. And I've expanded it to not just myself, but to the world around me in which I live.
Okay, we will come back to that. Let's talk about this space that we are sitting in. When you said we must come and have the interview here, I did not understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what is the significance of the space that we are sitting in?
Yeah, well,
Introduce this space. I mean, what
yes,
is it? And
uh, this archive had its origins in Gauteng. It was a famous engineer, water engineer, and water specialist who started the collection already in the early 1940s, dealing with wastewater in Johannesburg and issues of mining water also on the Witwatersrand. And then that research group that was at the University of the Witwatersrand, they shifted to the new Council for Scientific and Industrial Development, the CSIR, in Pretoria, and where it became a very fixed scientific water research entity.
yes,
And they started collecting information to provide to researchers in all parts of South Africa. And in the process, they developed a collection of pamphlets, articles, books, conference programs, and papers from Russia to the United States, from all over the world. And then in the 1960s, as sanctions started settling in on South Africa, these scientists still had many contacts overseas, and they built up very good relations. And that enabled them to build up one of the largest collections of water information in the world. It was more than 700,000 items that they had on catalog, and it was in all these boxes. So we
okay,
inherited that in 2012 when the Water Research Commission gave it to us. And we started the South African Water History Archival Repository with
okay,
the intention of scanning all this information on digital data so that we can disseminate it with
yes,
anybody interested in information on water.
okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. We've got a few books that I want you to quickly talk about very briefly before we go into
Okay.
the history of the Vaal Triangle. And
Yes. Okay. This one at this study is a study that our research group conducted fairly recently on public administration, and we wrote about the Vaal Triangle and issues related to water, the unrest that we had in the 2010s, 2017, 2018, and the early 2020s related to water. And we reported on that, trying to make people in the field of public administration, civil servants, aware of what the problems are in respect of why don't people pay for water? Why don't they get services? What are municipalities doing? And why do we fail in accomplishing the conservation of water and the sound use of water under various circumstances. So that was basically it. But it's water studies is a very broad field, and this is a magnificent study on the rivers and wetlands of Cape Town. Now, when you travel from the Vaal up to the Highveld,
Yes.
you have wetlands all along the Highveld, and those wetlands are actually the filters of water systems, and they purify water, so they work very hard. And you find that people plow in those wetlands, they throw their rubbish in that wetlands, and they are not aware of the damages they cause. And wetlands are so fantastic. Uh, we in the water sector speak about the sponsors of wetlands purifying water, working overtime to purify water to flow down rivers into the Vaal, for example. And that water flows further downstream, because if you don't start cleaning it, and we don't have enough chemistry to deal with all the water problems we have. So if you can use nature to provide you with water, it's of great value. And one of the oldest cities, modern Western cities in Africa, is Cape Town. And this deals with the rivers and wetlands of Cape Town,
Okay.
and goes back to ancient times, to
Sure.
the Khoi and to the San people roaming those water-rich areas in close proximity to the Karoo territory, which is basically desert. And if you go up with the Namib Desert, you are dealing with the desert, the oldest desert in the world, history of the world, dating back about 50,000 years ago. And what happens if this desert expands in the era of climate change further south?
Mm.
In 2019, 2018, we had Cape Town's Day Zero,
Yes.
when people, my wife and I went down there, and we saw how people were taking water from the taps that the municipality had set aside for them. And one of the old watering points of the colonial Cape Town was Mostard's mill water supply that the South African breweries are using today. And people took water, and they still take water from there, and it's a pure supply of water. So in one of the most advanced cities of South Africa, people, when the crisis came, they resorted back to former times, early colonial and even pre-colonial times, securing water supplies for themselves. And if we go on messing up the river, polluting the river with solid waste and sewage and the like, how are we going to preserve drinking water?
The
That
resource.
is a very important thing that we have to think upon. And the reasons for that is it's population growth, people migrating.
Yes.
Migrations are as old as humans are. And the earliest water users that we know of are probably the San. They are late Stone Age people, and they lived first in the eastern parts of southern Africa, close to the coast.
Okay.
And then about, say 2 millennia ago, the Bantu-speaking people with sophisticated technologies came into southern Africa on the eastern side, and they had livestock. They had modern strategies of cultivating the lands, Iron Age tools that they used for cultivating the land, and they were perfect fishermen, environmentally fishermen in the rivers running into the sea. By 600 AD, the Ndebele people were in in what is today the Eastern Cape, the Lower Eastern
Yes.
Cape, and more Bantu-speaking people moved in to Southern Africa. And what happened was the prime sources that the San people were hunting were the hippopotami in the rivers.
Okay.
And once the Africans came with advanced Iron Age skills, spears and tools, fighting tools, they literally forced the Bushmen, the San people, into the central parts of southern Africa. And the San were familiar with the area probably for as long as 20,000 years. So they knew what it was like to live in the desert, and they settled them permanently. But
Okay.
on the fringes of the Drakensberg, you still had Bushmen people living there right until deep into the 20th century. And they knew how weather patterns worked.
Okay.
If you speak to the Zulu-speaking people, you speak to the Xhosa-speaking people, they will tell you, yes, we use these people because they knew
The
weather.
weather.
And also we have evidence of the San people in Mapungubwe, where Mapungubwe is today.
Yes.
It was first inhabited by San people. Then Iron Age people moved in there and they started an urban area. And they used the San people, the Bushman people, living on the edges of their settlement, who provided them with information. Is it going to be a water-rich year, or is it going to be a drought condition that we face?
Mm.
And eventually, the San people started engaging with livestock farmers, cattle farmers and sheep farmers, coming in from the western side of of Africa, lower Africa, and also, especially on the eastern side, the cattle farmers who came in, and the San then became Khoi because they intermingled with the black people.
Okay.
And in that way, they learned these skills so that by the time in the 1650s, when the first Dutch arrived here, and they started a station, and they engaged with the Khoi people, and they exchanged Khoi for cattle for copper. And that is how they used copper to make tools and beads and the like. And also, of course, tobacco. So, and water was at the center. And the conflicts that broke out at the Cape was about water,
Yes.
having access to river streams.
Let's talk about Mapungubwe. Long before Johannesburg, long before the discovery of gold, long before the Vaal Triangle became South Africa's industrial heart, there was Mapungubwe. Situated in what is today the Limpopo province, at the meeting point of present-day South Africa, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, Mapungubwe became Southern Africa's first known kingdom. It flourished between approximately 1220 and 1290 AD, centuries before the European settlement at the Cape. This was no ordinary settlement. Mapungubwe was a sophisticated civilization built upon leadership, trade, agriculture, craftsmanship, and the intelligent use of its natural environment. Its location was no accident. Positioned at the confluence of the Limpopo and Shashe rivers, the kingdom occupied one of the most strategic landscapes in southern Africa. Rivers provided water, fertile soils, movement, and access to long-distance trade routes that connected the interior of Africa with the east coast of the continent. Although estimates vary, historians believe that between 5,000 and 9,000 people lived within the capital and its surrounding settlements, making Mapungubwe one of the largest and most influential societies of its time in southern Africa. What made Mapungubwe remarkable was not simply its size, but its complexity. It had a clearly organized political system, a royal leadership, specialized artisans, farmers, traders, and evidence of sophisticated social organization. Gold was worked into ceremonial objects. Iron was smelted into tools. Pottery was crafted with remarkable skill, and glass beads from distant lands revealed that the kingdom was connected with international trade networks that stretched across the Indian Ocean. Among its most famous discoveries is the golden rhino, a powerful symbol of leadership, craftsmanship, and the prosperity that once existed. Today, Mapungubwe is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its ruins remind us that long before the industrial economy of modern South Africa, advanced African civilization had already developed systems of governance, commerce, engineering, and international trade. Understanding Mapungubwe changes the way we understand our own history. It reminds us that the story of South Africa did not begin with colonial settlement or the discovery of minerals. It began much earlier with societies that understood their environment, built thriving communities, and laid important foundations for generations that followed. As we continue our journey through the history of the Vaal, Mapungubwe offers us the first glimpse into a much larger story, one where rivers were not merely sources of water, but lifeblood of civilization itself.
Okay, so from there, you find that the British took over the Cape in 1795, and they actually started.
Before you go to the British, Prof, what was the language that African people were using? The Ndebele people, what were they speaking? Ndebele?
Yes, it was basically they were at the forefront, the Ndebele people.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because in the northern province, in Limpopo, you also find Ndebele settlements. And those are very early people who arrived in Southern Africa, South
Okay.
Africa, and they chose to live here because it was similar to the areas in along the eastern coast of Africa that they were accustomed to.
Okay.
So the Bantu-speaking people came from West Africa, and they migrated across the Sahara Desert.
Okay.
Into the east, and they picked. They managed to garner some technologies from the Hamitic people, half Egyptian, also Arabic people that they engaged with. They learned skills, how to use beads to trade and conduct commerce. But their major contribution was the cultivation of the land.
Okay.
And farming, agriculture. And the Bushmen essentially were hunter-gatherers. So they took what the land had to offer them.
Okay. All right. And then the British came.
Yes.
And this is in the 16...
Yeah, that was 1795. There was this opening, and it was also, it coincided with the French Revolution and also changes in Europe taking place, so that only in the early 1800s did the British formally annex, with the permission of the Netherlands, the Cape,
Okay.
as a preliminary colony, but it was essentially used to service the um, uh, uh, ships of the Netherlands visiting the Cape to go and get some spices in Asia.
Okay.
And then they would circumnavigate around the Cape again. And then in the process, we also acquired Malayan people from East Asia to settle in South Africa. So we were really a mixed grill by the early 1800s.
Okay.
So it was a long period of engagement. And then, because of slavery, the Dutch tolerated slavery at the Cape, and they didn't want the whites to use it. They wanted the people to be free. And then they.
So just let's go back a bit. So in the Cape, it was the Dutch.
Mm,
Were the Bushmen there?
There were small pockets of Bushmen. They were very mobile communities because they had no livestock. They were hunter-gatherers. But the Khoi people were agriculturalists and also pastoralists. They knew what the weather conditions were and where the best grazing fields were.
Okay. So a bit of the Bushmen and the Khoi.
Mm.
And then I also want to understand the difference between the two, because I think a lot of us don't understand the difference. Were the Bantu,
Yeah.
and they were slaves? Some.
We didn't enslave people, or the Dutch didn't enslave people locally.
Okay.
They did taking people to work for them, and those were primarily Khoi people because they were a little more civilized than the San people. But we got lots of slaves from Asia in South Africa, and also then after the Haiti revolution of the slaves. Haiti was a French colonial area in the Americas, in the Central Americas, and that started actions in the United Kingdom against slavery.
Okay.
And also the Americans were involved in slavery. And that was halted by the British, who made a principled case of that to prevent the slavery of people. And that is why they started bringing in missionaries, British missionaries, and also even earlier, you had German missionaries in South Africa proselytizing the indigenous people of Southern Africa. And increasingly, as the Cape became under the British more populated, the British missionaries played a major role of proselytizing, translating the Bible for the indigenous people.
What is proselytizing?
Propagating your religious orientations.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is the Muslim people at the Cape, they never chose Christianity. They stuck to their religion. And out within the confines of the Islamic community, you had the emergence of the Afrikaans language. There are words of Asia and Africa and the Dutch and English that contributed to the formation of the Afrikaans language.
Okay.
And so it's really a mixed up system,
Yes.
but it was a melting pot situation. And especially once the slaves were set free, many of them remained in free bondage on the farms, and they became integrated with these farmers. And there were even French Huguenots coming from France because the Catholics prosecuted them. They
Okay.
didn't want them in the country. They didn't want these Protestants in the country. And then our wine industry essentially comes from the French Huguenots that came to South Africa. So it was a major melting pot on a smaller scale than what was happening in the United States of America. But it was a global north activity that started trending and having an impact on society as it started taking shape along the Cape.
Okay. I want us to then draw it closer to the Vaal Triangle.
Mm.
When do first inhabitants of this area come, and what leads to them coming here?
Okay. You familiar with the N1?
Yes.
Okay. So you can go from Cape Town right up to Cairo in the north.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in pre-colonial times, the highway from east to west and west to east was the Vaal River and the Orange River.
Okay.
And along those routes, your early livestock farmers and your hunter-gatherers moved. Those
Along
were the
the
routes
river.
they followed, in close proximity of the water resources. And they were quite familiar with the area. And they were so good that they even used devices, local devices, pieces of wood
Okay.
floating on the water to convey their livestock from the one bank of the river to the other. And so it was a way of easily moving in an easterly direction. As soon as you started, as the water started flowing down to the Indian Ocean, you knew you were moving downstream.
Okay.
And on the at the helm of the Drakensberg Range, when you reached the top, the water started rolling in the western direction. And that is how people transported themselves and how they knew how to move around
Okay.
in the interior of South Africa.
And who then becomes the early inhabitants of the region? Because I would imagine at first they were using just the river to pass and then come back. What triggers the first inhabitants to decide that this is where we are going to now settle?
Yeah, well, if you go up to with the Klip River in let's say the southern parts of Johannesburg, you have the Klip River rock formations, and it's actually fantastic grazing lands. And that's where African pastoralists, they resided as of approximately about, let's say, 600-700 years ago,
Okay.
up to the 19th century.
Pastoralist, what is that?
They
Explain
were
the terms.
animal farmers. They
Okay.
had livestock.
Oh,
They had goats, they had sheep, they had cattle. And that was their wealth, and they needed grazing lands. And then, interestingly enough, you find these eastern frontier farmers moving into the interior as of 1838 up to the late 1870s. And they chose to live where Parys is today.
Okay.
Ngwati, and also Suikerbosrand, and then along the Klip River at Glen Vista, you have traces of them. They have a nature conservation area there with these Iron Age communities and their large corrals for their livestock, enclosed in rock formations, and it was a flourishing community.
Okay.
So they thrived there well into deep into the 19th century. And then the footprint, the colonial footprint of the British deepened, because in the 1850s, on the edges of the Kalahari, you find in Kimberley, the first discovery of diamonds was made in the 1850s. It was on the sand.
On the surface.
And people just picked it up.
Okay.
And then that information reached Grahamstown. And the next moment it was in Cape Town, and the British said, let's go for it. And you had people coming from all over the world, from Europe, United States, and even from Asia, increasingly more people, because in the 1850s, they started farming with sugarcane on the East Coast in KwaZulu-Natal. And for that, they imported Indian laborers to help cultivate the sugar. So can you imagine?
So at that point, diamonds were already a resource that is recognized as a...
Yes, it's been like that for many hundreds of years. And especially if you look at Indian history, it's laden with lots of focus on diamonds. And most of our diamonds flow down the rivers towards the Atlantic. And, so even today in Lesotho, there are diamond mining operations. So historically, these crystals literally floated down. They were washed down the rivers, and all over, they contributed to great wealth for people mining it. But for example, in the case of Kimberley, it was essentially in one of the pipes, diamond pipes, that filled up with soil and water over millions of years. And that is where they started mining. And that is what attracted people to South Africa.
Okay. So the first mining activity was diamonds, was the interest in diamonds.
Before that, in 1850, they mined a copper.
Okay.
On the arid Western Cape, and it was not very constructive. And after 1850, more of the focus was on going into the interior, doing explorations, and you had many travelers looking for mineral wealth throughout southern Africa, and they were hunters as a rule, and they actually paved the way. And in the wake of the hunters, you had the missionaries coming. So the hunters would shoot out the wildlife, and the missionaries came with the Bible, and they proselytized the African people. And the Swiss missionary, or the descendant of a Swiss missionary, told me, yes, my ancestors came to Africa and we gave the people the Bible.
Okay.
And they gave us the land. Because in the process of Christianizing them, they became workers, farm workers, and they didn't have the same conception of land tenure, land ownership, because the tribal traditions were busy fracturing and they were deteriorating because of the contamination by the Western Christianity, and probably by Islam coming in from the East. So it was a real mixed grill of religious ideas you also had.
So the story that the Christian missionaries gave the the early
Yes.
inhabitants the Bible,
Yeah.
and they gave the land. It's true.
Yeah, I think it's true because I did extensive research in the Soutpansberg region, and you had wonderful missionary operations there, the Swiss missionaries, the German missionaries, and even the Dutch Reformed Church of the Cape in the Soutpansberg region.
Mm.
And behind that all, you had Mujaji at Duivelskloof, and she was the rain queen. And people all along the east coast and the interior of East and Southern Africa, they knew Mujaji, and if they wanted rain, they would go to her and win her favor. People even in Zimbabwe, they did that. But Mujaji was a descendant of the people of the Zimbabwean Empire.
Okay.
You understand? So, and why would she be this mother of creating water and rainfall? So it was a very deep laden religious culture that you had, even at Mapungubwe.
Mm.
And that had been contaminated by the teachings of Christian missionaries.
I just want to understand that. So, what was the value that the African or the Bantu people saw in the Bible? Was it the faith that they wanted that made them give? Because land was valuable to them, unless if it did not have value. But if it was valuable, what value were they seeing as receiving back?
Well, first of all, the missionaries came in and actually protected the indigenous people from the people of Europe moving into the interior of South Africa.
Okay.
For example, until the end of the 19th century, if you were a hunter or a farmer taking your livestock into the interior of South Africa, you go to the local landrost or the magistrate of your town, and you get a license for 2 and 6 to hunt bushmen, and then you shoot them.
Yeah.
So that lasted into the 19th century. So that was very crude. So you can take it for yourself. Say you are a peaceful Griqua community and you are invaded by these people from far away. You are very vulnerable.
Yes.
And they may give you the Bible and the hope of everlasting life in the year after, but it didn't save you from the threats of other profit seekers and farmers, new settlers moving into the area. And even if you weren't proselytized by the Christian missionaries, you were still subjected to the aspiration to get some booze, some tobacco, and exchange your goods, your crops, with the hunters and the traders moving around in the interior of Southern Africa. And also, you, say, for example, you're an adventurous young person, you go with this hunter and you accompany him, or you go with the missionary, you accompany them, and you learn their skills, and eventually they also start teaching you. And so there were very noble intentions
Okay.
with the missionaries moving into Southern Africa. And the German missionaries were among the first to start working among the San people and the Khoi people in the Cape. And then as they moved into the interior, also the British missionaries came in, and more German missionaries, and also French missionaries. So it was a very
Mixed up.
mixed up system, but that was a very good export item. And remember, if you brought in Christianity, if you were a Christian, they could not enslave you. And that was, I think, the message that the missionaries wanted to convey.
Okay. All right. I want us to go back to the first finding of diamonds in Kimberley and understand how does that influence industrialization towards this region and the Wetwaters Rand.
Okay. Now, in the United States of America, by the 19th century, Americans, after they had won the war against the British, they started moving from the east coast of the United States to the west coast.
Okay.
And in the process of moving across the continent, they became very mobile people, opening up new frontiers and settlements, people coming over from Europe, surplus population. People moved into the United States. And this system was emulated literally in Southern Africa because there were magnificent gold findings in North America.
Okay.
And even in South America, in early pre-colonial South America, and later when the Spanish took over control there. So that was, mining was a very nice way to become very rich very quickly. So many of those adventurers moving to the west of the United States, many of them turned back and left the United States for Southern Africa when it became known there were diamonds to mine here. So the European stock markets were very favorably disposed towards mining ventures. And these people, Cecil John Rhodes became rich on the diamond fields. And also the founder of Vereniging, Sammy Marks.
Okay.
He was inspired by the idea of diamond mining, and then he locally arrived here, and then you realize, no, but on the other side of the river, there are coal deposits. And we'll start mining that. That was on the Free State side, and they also found it on the Transvaal side. So in that way, immediately he created markets.
Okay.
And because in 1882, the Struben brothers in the area of round about Roodepoort, today's Roodepoort, they discovered gold.
Okay.
And that really sparked off everything as of 1882. So that in 1886, the city of Johannesburg was founded, a mining city.
Okay. I just want to, I think there's an important part that we probably missed. Let's talk about Lesotho. You mentioned Mujaji, which I think it was on the northern side of the African or the South African region. Let's talk a little bit about Lesotho and what happens there. You know, when does Lesotho become Lesotho? Who is in Lesotho? And where does it extend to? I just want to capture that history.
Yeah, well, if you ask the politicians of Lesotho how far did their area stretch, they will tell you it was the Free State Highveld, right up to the edge of the desert. It's very difficult because it's like a landmine.
Okay.
But in the 1860s, there was a groundbreaking war against the Basotho by both British colonial people from Natal and people who came from the Western Cape. The Dutch-speaking people on the eastern frontiers against Moshesh. They wanted to safeguard their interests.
Okay.
Bethlehem and those areas because they had acquired it. And Moshe didn't accept that, and he rebelled against it. And then the British governor of the Cape drew a boundary line, and he said, "Okay, this is what." The southern Sotho, what the Sotho people, that's the kingdom, the mountain kingdom of the southern Sotho people, that is not accessible. And these frontier farmers in what we call the Eastern Free State today, they had to be left on their own. But there were constant ramifications um, for the greater part of the 19th century. But it was also inhabited by both English colonial and Dutch colonial people in the 19th century.
Okay. And the people from Lesotho, they would come up to the Vaal River.
You know what? Most of the maize crops and livestock crops that they secured on the diamond fields
Yes.
came from Lesotho. So immediately after the discovery of diamonds, there was a major transportation of goods and services between the coast and Kimberley.
Yes.
And that opened up the way because many Sotho people started moving there. And when the gold discoveries followed in the Transvaal, they started moving that direction. So we've had migrating populations for a long, long time. For as long as there were invasions or new arrivals from people from elsewhere, bringing new technologies and new ideas, they embraced it, they absorbed it, and these people also started thriving under circumstances. Lesotho maize was very much in demand, and also the livestock. So the labor was also very important. So it became part of a massive, let's say, it was like a big market.
Yes.
And people were conveying goods and services wherever they settled.
Okay, so with Lesotho, in the main, it was the farming of maize.
Yeah,
and
livestock
and
farming
livestock.
as well.
Okay,
Yeah, in
all
the
right.
lower reaches of Lesotho.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then in the Vaal Triangle, you spoke about Semi Marx.
Yes.
He founded Vereeniging.
Yeah.
Before him, what is in here? If I stepped into this place prior to Semi Marx, what is happening in this region?
Okay, in the 1850s, you would have had the descendants, or let's say the early voortrekkers who had moved into the Free State, and those who chose to stay on the other side of the Vaal River, what is today the Free State, they preferably lived on the banks of the river. And remember, the river as we know it today wasn't full to the brim.
Okay.
It was only in times of floods that you would have had difficulties passing with your ox wagon through the river. So it was a symbolic boundary line of the Free State Republic. And many of those Free Staters, they traded in Johannesburg on the gold mines, and even earlier on the diamond mines as well. But they kept their properties here.
Okay.
And I take my dogs for a walk frequently on the other side of the river, and there's an old family there, Van Niekerks. They've been living there since about probably the 1840s, and they're still there. But now, the voortrekkers that entered this area, let's say the Vereeniging area, many of them moved up to Suikerbosrand,
Okay.
to the north of Henlyon Klip. And there they started farming because the land was suitable for their purposes.
Okay.
And they paved the way for the new incumbents, the British that moved in. And they obviously also participated in providing transport and fresh produce for the diamond miners. And then that switched also to serving the gold miners on the Witwatersrand with food, fresh produce, and also with livestock.
Okay. So there was now traffic between Kimberley and Witwatersrand.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And that was, let's say, a very strong strain of capitalism that made itself at home, because the river, the Vaal River, was actually a route for transport. Also,
Okay.
if you could have, but the river wasn't deep, as I told you earlier, so they couldn't go with a boat on the river. If they could have done that, can you imagine? It was like the Rhine River or the Thames River, from the
Yes.
sea to where everything was happening in London. So in South Africa, that our rivers were not living up to the expectations.
Okay.
So
The level was much lower than what it is for boats to
yes,
come in.
before they started damming it up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then the Voortrekkers came,
Yeah.
settled this side,
Yeah.
and then after that it was the British.
Yes, the British came after that, and then in 1870, is it 75? Yeah, they annexed
Okay.
the Transvaal Republic.
Where are the Bantu? I don't know what you call them
The
then.
Bantu-speaking people, yeah. You basically had the Tswana people in the western parts,
Okay.
and then the Sotho people in the southeastern parts, and then also the Transvaal Republic had very good relations with the Swazi people. And also remember that very often when they had skirmishes with the indigenous people, and it was, say, for example, little wars that started, if you settle in a certain space, they would take those children and keep them hostage. And that was a form of enslavement. And many of those black people stayed with the whites, especially in the Lowveld, you found that. And they became part and parcel of the families, because in the republics of the Free State and the Transvaal, slavery was not prohibited by the government. But the British said, if you conduct slavery, we will take measures against you. That's what they did also throughout the 19th century, acting against the enslavement of indigenous peoples. And also those people who had become enslaved were often released, and they lived side by side with the white owners of the land, because it enabled them to get labor.
Okay.
And they also had better knowledge of the environment than the people from the Cape. It was new territories they moved into.
On what conditions were they released? Were there conditions for the release of a slave?
The Voortrekkers didn't consider it as a form of enslavement, but the British missionaries defined it.
Okay.
And I accept that condition, but you had many people who literally stayed their lives with the Afrikaners or the Dutch moving into the interior. So it is a very difficult relationship to comprehend. But because of the expansion of land ownership,
Mm.
the right to annex a piece of land and say to the magistrate, this is the farm where I want to farm. Then later on, they would have farmers, black people living on their farms, and they would say, okay, you live on my farm, you have a crop, we share that crop, I want 50% of that, and your children, your wife and your children, they can come and work for me as the farmer. And in that way, they developed relationships that were similar to slavery,
Okay.
but also enabled them to develop, and they could even move away, so they would not easily be prosecuted by the farmer. And you have cases of that nature emerging, but it was a new technology, a new society moving into indigenous Iron Age South Africa, and they had things to offer. Both the Voortrekkers and the British colonials, they wanted the labor.
Okay.
And the African people were interested in getting to know the new technologies. How are these people operating?
Okay.
And in exchange for their indigenous knowledge and their labor, they got the Bible in many cases. So it's a difficult type of history, but also they learned certain skills.
Skills, yes.
And I think that's how, in the rural areas of South Africa, it persisted for a very long period of time.
Okay. All right. I want us to land a plane somewhere here, because we will sit again and go into the Vaal and understand, talk about semi-marks, talk about the early industrialization of the Vaal, because I think that's where I want us to take the conversation to.
Yeah.
This I am happy because I wanted us to paint a picture of what
Yeah.
this region looked
Yeah.
like and how
Yeah.
it formulated.
Yeah.
And I hope it gives someone who's going to watch this episode enough
Yeah.
information or some information
Yeah.
about what was
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
prior
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
us having people in this area.
Yeah.
So
Can I just ask you one thing?
yes,
I just want to give you an example of thinking
okay,
about this early era.
yes,
Okay, in my research on the Vaal River,
yes,
I came across students and people, local residents, who told me things about the indigenous people. And one a Sotho-speaking postgraduate student we had from Mkwati, he told us that he had conducted oral history interviews with people.
okay,
And in the area of the Vaal Dam, on the southeastern parts of the Vaal Dam, there are some streams flowing into the Vaal Dam. And what he had learned as a child at the foot of his elders in the community was that the first human being walked out of the water in that region. It is still east of where the Vaal Dam wall is situated, further east. So that is where the first person, first human being came out of the water.
okay,
So it suggests that the Sotho people actually walked out of the water. Now, it makes sense if you start residing further higher up in the mountains, you are also subjected to snow and you have water there, but you are familiar with water. You know how to work with water. And another person I interviewed was after 1994, the gentleman, he bought himself a house in Three Rivers.
Okay.
And he was a very wealthy person. And he made sure that he got a house on the Vaal Golf Road Drive. And just on the other side, you had the river.
Yes.
And in the evenings, he would go down to the river and sit there under a tree and look at the river. And from that, he found some solace, and it comforted his mind, and it made him aware of where he came from. And that same man, when he and his family moved into that house, they didn't know what a bathtub was, that there was a sewage service, that they could use the toilet, and they could water their gardens. So that was all foreign to them, but he was in search of this space.
Okay.
And I think that is part of our connectedness with the Highveld and the wetlands that we have. If you look here, if you travel up, look on your on the western side of the N1, you see there are lots of wetlands, small wetlands going up to the further north. But those wetlands proliferated the land, and it tells me that the Iron Age people, the Sotho people, they were here for a long time, probably, let's say, at least, some people would say 1600, I would say even before
Earlier.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Probably closer to 1200 years, in the 1200s, probably the early people moved into the region.
Okay. And those are the people that became the Basotho people. And what language were they? Where do you perhaps know when they started? Let's say in the 1200s. What language did they speak?
It was probably a whole mixture. They
It was
would
a
have
mixture.
blended with various societies, communities, and probably even some San language, some words of the
Okay.
San language or the Khoi language. You know, it's very difficult if you think how languages are shaped. And the dialect, I'm familiar with the Sotho dialect in the north, and it's different from the one in the south. And it's wonderful if you think, now what separated the people? Was it the Wonderboom in Pretoria, Tshwane, where also the Tswana people claimed as their own? So it's, but it was a very nice blend. Learning skills. If you wanted to be streetwise, you had to learn all the languages that the people were talking. And now with with many of the people wanting to chase the immigrants of elsewhere in Africa back to their homelands, what do they look at? The language, the communications levels. And this is a Zimbabwe. You must go back.
You must go back, yeah. And it's very interesting that when you narrate the history and you begin to understand it from this perspective, you realize how integrated we are. Despite us having these challenges today,
Yes.
but essentially we were very integrated as as a community, and we still are. It's just that we
Yeah.
probably don't see it now because we don't tell stories like
Yeah,
this very
yeah,
often.
yeah. You know, what we tend to underestimate is the dynamics of industrialization.
Okay.
Now, when I speak about industrialization, I speak about the first Bantu-speaking people in the Lowveld that built furnaces and they melted iron in the 19th century
Okay.
for ploughing, for spears, and for bow and arrows, for the arrows. And they also traded meat, metals, ochre. Ochre, we go back more than 2,000 years. It was mined in Swaziland and taken to the Portuguese coast
Okay.
as of the 1400s. So trade coincided with industry, and that brought about what we call commerce, material accumulation of material wealth.
Okay.
And in all those activities, if you wanted to flourish, if you wanted to establish a village, for example, in the Highveld or in the Lowveld, or against the Drakensberg Ridge, you looked at water resources, water supplies. That was key.
Okay.
And also, you would safeguard yourself, but you were always in close proximity of water resources. And it had to be a resource that would not easily dry up. And the Klip River is a very good example of that.
Okay.
And the Klip River, as you know, it finishes up in the Vaal River. So that was also a highway for people to move from the Vaal River into what is called now the Witwatersrand, that would become a super high-veld region that was populated in the industrial period of South Africa's growth.
Okay. For interest sake, Prof, the early indigenous people, when they were having these furnaces, what was the material that they were using to contain whatever that they would be melting? Because I would imagine you need to first have a pot of some sort.
Yes, yes, yes.
To melt that with.
Yeah, they use clay pots.
Okay.
And many of your indigenous people still have clay pot traditions. And it is remarkable what they could have done. And they were also skilled. They were blacksmiths by excellence. They knew how to make spears. They knew how to make these devices for cutting the land
Yes.
open for agricultural purposes. So those were skills that were transmitted up from Eastern Africa down to South Africa. And much of the copper mining preceded the iron working. And Messina, up on the banks of the Limpopo River, that was a site, a well-known site for copper mining. And that was a very cherished metal, but it could not withstand the pressure of hard agricultural land use on the Highveld.
Okay.
So they would have opted for metals.
Okay. So in as far as the industrial development happened, it started first with copper.
Yeah.
And then it became iron.
Yeah, yeah. It was transitional, yeah. And then they would also blend iron and copper to give you brass, which was a little stronger than the copper.
Okay.
And that very often manifested in jewelry and hard-working materials.
Okay. And then after that came diamonds.
Yeah,
Or is there any other, let's say mining or industrialization item that became
the Bushmen, they used the diamonds
really
for scraping the hides of the animals
animals?
they hunted down
Okay.
in the arid parts of South Africa. And those scrapers were usually diamonds. And also, many of the engravings that you find on rocks were made with diamonds, because diamond is a hard
Material.
rock, yeah.
Yes.
And so they were very streetwise, those guys.
Yeah. Okay. So it's copper, iron, diamonds, and then gold came much
Yeah,
later.
yeah, yeah. Well, the gold, where did the gold come from? I think it had been there long before, but probably in what is today Zimbabwe, the eastern parts of Zimbabwe, where Mapungubwe is situated. It would have been in that proximity. But I also know further to the west, closer to Botswana, they would also have mined for gold.
Okay.
And the major breakthroughs came when the on the Witwatersrand. Now, probably it's possible that, say, for example, an indigenous local African Sotho person living on the Highveld knew about gold, and he would have showed these Struben brothers, look, this is what we have here. And immediately these guys knew what they were onto. And they started exploring. So there was always an agency, a form of agency, an instrument of agency. Like, you know something that I don't know, and you tell me about that, and I start connecting the dots. Because I'm a wealthy capitalist and I want to make more and more and more and destroy the land, the water, pollute the water. We're making progress, but I don't know how much progress that really is if we are unable to deal with that in a proper way. And in many cases, you find that when indigenous people use the land, when they used the mineral resources that were available, it was not in excess.
Yes.
They would use it moderately. They would not overexploit it. And I think that is maybe something that we can remember from the ancestors. And that goes
A lesson for us to learn.
Yeah, yeah. And be very careful in using the land. And if you have to mine, do it in a responsible way. It's just like the one side is dealing with poverty.
Yes.
The other side is dealing with extreme wealth aspirations. That makes you think. What is that driver making capitalists so crazy about mining?
Yeah.
And destroying the environment. But you need that. You can't live without it.
Yes.
And
we are constantly depleting these resources.
we are. And it's time that we start taking note of that. And the first resource we can start conserving in a very humane way, I would say, is water.
Yes.
If we know how to deal with potable water and save it and work with it parsimoniously, and also how to use water for our own benefit by using it in the sewage for dishwashing, etc., household purposes, but doing it in a responsible way. And then it's not about me and my family on our own in this little informal shack. It's about our community.
Yes.
And once we can start those bonds, and if my neighbor has problems with his water, I can go and help him, or he can come and help me. The same goes for the sewage.
Yes.
And if you have an orderly system establishing itself, where people feel at home and where there is an opportunity for them to make a living, then it can start improving. But what we have at present is we have a situation where you get samas, like mining,
Yeah.
and they destroy, they take out cables, and our infrastructure systems are vulnerable.
Hmm.
And I don't know how we can overcome that major problem, because it's a sin against humanity if you, on the banks of the Vaal River, go into an old pumping house of Rand water and you start chopping away in this structure to get to rusted old water pipes, which you go and sell to the iron dealer, waste iron dealer. That is not constructive. But there are certain forces driving that, and we
Yes.
need to comprehend that. And I do not know how we are going to deal with it effectively, because the police aren't capable of doing it, not even the owners of these properties. How are we going to instill certain values? That is a no-go.
Prof, I think we have, discussed quite a lot for today. I'm happy that you have given us an opportunity to expand on this. I wanted to get the early history. I think we've covered that hopefully sufficiently. And I'm looking forward to the next few episodes that we're going to have with you, extending this. But we appreciate you welcoming us. We really appreciate the coffee that you've shared with us.
Okay. I hope we can make our two other colleagues also amenable to a good cup of strong coffee.
Yes, yes.
But I'll bring some sugar for you, Liberty. And crystal, I don't know. I don't have any crystals. But coffee is very nice, and it is African. It comes from Ethiopia. In the highlands of Ethiopia, the goats first dwelled in these forests, indigenous forests where coffee was growing.
Yes.
And they started eating the beans that had been burned by the forest fires.
Okay.
And these goats were very energetic. And then eventually the Ethiopian people discovered that. And then the Arabs came, the Arabs with these noses,
Yes.
they smelt the coffee. And then they came after that. And from there, we have the most trustworthy drinking fluid on earth.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But it's an African drink. That's why I consume it.
I didn't know that. But today I know that we are having an African drink.
Yeah.
All right. No, thank you so much, Prof. I think let's meet again next week and go more into the Vaal. We'll talk about the industrialization of the Vaal. We'll talk about the, urbanization of this area. I think it's important to capture that history and understand it. But today I really thank and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I am humble, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share some information.
Thank you.